and welcome back to the CODESHO podcast every day. Every day. Welcome to the CODESHO podcast every day.
Every week, every day.
Every day. Today we have Kevin on the line, buddy of Matt's. I'm just going to go without further ado, just hand it off over to Matt. Introduce your buddy to everybody.
Cool. Yeah. So this is my friend Kevin Carroll. We've been friends since high school. We went to high school together. Obviously, we went to our junior college, our community college together. We were in a rock band, like a punk rock band, long time ago, together. And me and a couple of our buddies went into programming. And so I guess Kevin, you just brought up something that I didn't know. So actually, we even went to Digipen together, but that's what we're going to get into. How and why did you first start getting into programming?
Yeah, so I guess after we went to Green River Community College, I went on to University of Washington, UW, and I was getting a sociology degree at the time. But while I was getting that, I just took a bunch of different electives. I was just doing random stuff just to, get my degree. And one of the things I took, I can't even remember what the first class I took was, but it was something related to, computers and like kind of dipping into programming. We were doing some HTML stuff and JavaScript, interacting with that. And so that was kind of the first time I did anything with that. I was just taking that elective class and I kind of liked it. And so then I took another class and it was like Java programming. At that time, though, I don't know if I missed a class in between, like if I should have taken some other like intro to programming, because I took that Java one and I just remember I struggled super hard with it, like because I was just taking it as elective and didn't know anything about programming. But at the time, like even though I struggled with that class, I still liked it. So I was just like, I didn't know what I was doing at the time with my sociology degree. So it's like if I ever need to do anything different, that's something I could look into because I did kind of enjoy that class.
And then we actually, so that that original story reminds me of Cole, because Cole went to not Digipen, and we'll talk about Digipen, but he always says it felt kind of ad hoc, and maybe that's one of the dangers. Like you weren't getting a CS degree anyway, but maybe that's one of the dangers is it's easy to skip. It's possibly easy to skip some intermediate like prereq, so that kind of sucks. Okay, but then so you took some programming at UW. You got your sociology degree, but then we just worked. Like, because I remember me and you worked at a pizza place together. Me and you worked at, did you work at Corporate Express with me? The box place?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So that there was no programming.
And at Courtesy Glass.
And at Courtesy Glass. That's what, yeah. So we worked at the pizza place together. We worked at the construction place together. During that time, I think we even quit on the same day, but I was quitting to go to Digipen. I was tired of, I told that story in the first episode, but I was quitting because we have another mutual friend who was making a bunch of money in programming, and I was making not good money, and Kevin was making not good money installing mirrors and shower doors. So I quit to go to Digipen, and then what did you do after that?
Yeah, I remember I did quit at the same time you did, just because I didn't have any plans of school yet, but I just didn't like that job. I wasn't going to work there, not with you. So I don't remember what I was doing at the time, but I think I was just like, oh, I don't know, like just like we had been doing. Like I still don't know what I want to do, but I just wasn't jumping into Digipen yet.
And we were I was in the band still. We like at that time when I started, we were both in the band, so we thought that would take.
Yeah, I don't remember what job I was working at that time. I probably just went back to like pizza delivery or something. But
no, you worked on the side. You worked on the side of the road. You were cleaning up the garbage.
Was that what I was doing then? Yeah. Oh, no, that was after I quit DeVry, which we can get into.
Okay.
Because that's what I like. At some point after you started, there was like a few months where I don't remember what I was doing. And then I think it was probably pretty shortly after that, I was just like, man, I don't know what I'm doing either. Like there's just a bunch of crap jobs that I'm working. So now I decided to do two, but you can't start Digipen until like fall, basically. Like everybody just like starts fall. And so you can't just start randomly in the middle of like a year. So I had to wait. And then since I had to wait, I was looking at it. And then DeVry had just come out with like a video game course or whatever degree that you could get. And so I was like, well, I don't really want to wait a year. I wonder like how different it could be. So I'll just try doing that. And so, because I could start that, I think I started in like December or January or something at the time, or maybe even the end of November. But
and then, so was the purpose of that just to get some courses under your belt so you could go to Digipen?
No, I actually would have probably stuck with it if I'd ended up liking it. Like I just wanted to get an early start, and obviously this is pre Digipen, so it's like obviously we'd heard some stuff from Josh, but I didn't know like how good DeVry's education would be compared to Digipen's, and so I'm like, it could be just as good. Like I don't know, and so I was planning on just going to try it out, but after just going like that first quarter there, and you were going to Digipen simultaneously, so I was hearing everything you were learning about, and then like looking at the stuff we were going over, and I'm like, oh, this is just way light in comparison. And I was also getting like 100% on everything in class, and like asking the teacher for more work, and just like and then so yeah, I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna have to wait and go to Digipen to get like a better education.
Okay, so I'm gonna so you've been working in the industry, like games and or whatever. You did games for a while, and you've been an iOS dev for like 7 years or something, right? 8 years, because you graduated
5 or 6 or
yeah. Okay, so you graduated 1 year after me, and you've been working since then while I was teaching over in Korea. But real quick, let's circle back. You don't have to talk much about Digipen, but I am curious, now that you're like in senior level dev. Obviously, we all think Digipen was good, but do you think getting a bachelor's degree is necessary for somebody to get a job? Let's say not in games, but just like to get a programming job. Do you think a degree is necessary?
I mean, I guess the short answer is no. Like, I'm trying to think of how to elaborate on that. It's just, I think it's like, I guess I went to school, so I didn't really just self-teach. So I don't really have enough experience to say like, oh yeah, you can just self-teach, like, and like learn all this stuff and be okay. Like, I think there are a lot of people who do that. So there are examples. I just can't speak to that personally. But one thing I could say definitively is like, I don't think the cost of Digipen was worth it. Like, I think you could have got that information in other ways for a lot cheaper. Yeah. Like just even going to a different school, like a public, like UW or something, and taking computer science there, it would have just been cheaper.
When I met you, Digipen, I had never heard of Digipen before until you said something. I'm just curious because you guys talk about it so much. Do people in the games industry like respect that name? Like, is that a name that like everybody knows?
At least in the Seattle area, I'm sure that's true.
Like from my understanding is like, I don't really know because I'm not on the outside. So this is just all like what you hear about. But like, I remember like Microsoft, like the two biggest schools it recruited from for developers was Digipen and MIT or something.
So Microsoft has like a tier system of like when you get a resume, because I remember hearing that same thing. When you submit a resume to Digipen, they have schools that they kind of like rank in tiers, right? So tier 1 includes MIT, and our campus when we went to school was actually right by the Microsoft campus. So like they know each other. And so yeah, they had just like one of our years there, they had just moved Digipen up to that same rank as MIT.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, I'm not saying that the degree
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool though. That's what I'm saying. So at the very least, like in the Redmond, Seattle, Bothell area, like there's like 122 game studios in the Seattle area. And that's probably in part due to the fact that Digipen was there.
Right. I guess it probably the cost of Digipen being worth it or not. It sounds like if you go to Digipen, like you're gonna get a job when you get out for the most part. It sounds like, right? Is that fair to say? At least in Seattle,
we had a pretty high. I mean, yeah, like certainly you could. First of all, we had a pretty high dropout rate, and so like because it was tough. It was tough, but if you were good enough to graduate. Certainly some people slip through the cracks. If you were good enough to graduate, you probably built a network in those 4 years, which would help you get a job.
I was going to say, yeah, because then so many people just go on to like get jobs, and then you just like know people, especially people that were ahead of you, and go on to get jobs. And so it is a good way to develop a network.
It's a hefty price to pay, but if you're pretty much guaranteed a job and you can kind of create a pretty awesome career out of that, maybe it's worth it, especially if you're not the type of person, especially going into programming, that knows how to like just find answers to stuff without them being kind of just given to you. Sounds like Digipen might be a good option. I know that that's kind of the trajectory right now that my buddy Gregory that we just had on, that's kind of what he's on, where he's like, tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do.
Yeah, definitely. Digipen taught me. I mean, I don't know. I was a good employee at like Courtesy Glass anyway, so maybe that was part of my personality. But I really feel like Digipen taught me how to learn. Like you learn how to learn, and I think that's maybe the most important skill.
This is probably just the difference between your education and mine, and one of the reasons that I'm more hard on mine and like not as quick to recommend it, just because. Granted, I didn't get a bachelor's degree like you, so that's the first thing worth mentioning. I got an associate's degree, but I just left feeling like I still had to figure out a lot on my own. The majority of my learning was still on my own, and then leaving. Nobody's going to hire me with an associate's degree from a community college in Las Vegas. So it's like, it just felt like, yeah, I guess it's a cool resume point. I guess it's something to talk about, but I don't know if I've ever even talked about it in an interview. Not extensively, not nearly as much as they cared about my actual experience. You know what I mean? So
okay. So that kind of leads into another good question for Kevin. First of all, I know this. So you didn't graduate right away. You got a job. Was that first job an internship? How did you get your first job? Or
So yes, so I actually had an internship there while I was going to school, which should have been my last year. And so I just had an internship there, and but that ended before I finished my last year. Then I ended up getting hired there after I graduated, which we can allude to. But I ended up not. I've was one class short of getting my degree, and then so I was gonna have to take another whole semester just to take one class. And I can't remember, there were certain reasons that I was going to even have to put it off a whole semester and just do it, the following quarter or whatever.
Yeah.
And then so at that point I got hired because I was basically graduated at that point, and then I got hired at Signal. And then I got so busy working that I ended up never finishing that last class until 2 years later.
Okay, so you did go back. I couldn't remember if you did.
You did get the degree.
Yeah. After I eventually I quit that job, and then after I quit it, I actually made the time to finally do that last class.
Yeah,
just
I
graduate.
remember you talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would kind of suck to be that close and not.
I think that's why I ended up doing it, and that actually makes sense. And I know that there was at least a few Digipen students that I'd heard had done that, where they got an internship in their junior year, middle of junior year or middle of senior year even, and then it's just that moves into a full-time job. And I know our mutual buddy Josh said he learned more in the first year of working at the game company than all of the last 4 years, which obviously probably isn't 100% true, but it's more valuable. Working at an actual game company is more valuable than going to school.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I think Kevin did say that. I think I kind of remembered him saying I got so close. It's one class left. Might as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even it is true that you get more experience while you're working, but it wasn't necessarily even really about that. I guess I'm trying to remember now how everything happened, but now I'm losing my train of thought.
I mean, you're probably thinking I can get a job and start making some money too.
Yeah.
That's got to be pretty enticing.
Instead of earning debt, accruing.
Right. Instead of accruing debt. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's just I really had every intention to when I first started that job, but then it was just I was just oh yeah, I'll just do that on the side. It's just one class. But I was working in the video game industry, and it just it immediately was so intense that it's just I didn't have any time.
Because he was.
And so
he's told me a couple of stories about that job. He was the only dev working on 2 different projects. Were you working on mobile back then?
Yes. So when I first started, I was working on actually Windows Mobile, funny enough. And so because we were trying to make a companion app to an Xbox game that they're working on. So I was doing that. But then the other thing I was working on wasn't mobile.
Yeah.
It was working with a slot machine company, because they were allowing third-party developers to help make slot machine games in Vegas or just casinos. And so I was working on that, but it was using Unity to do that, which gave me exposure to that tool to start doing mobile development, because then they did start trying to actually make iPhone games. And so I was doing that too there eventually.
Mm-hmm. What year was that you were working on the Windows Phone app?
Oh my God. I feel 2011 or something like that.
Because I graduated in 2010. So you would have been like a senior at that point.
This is like the very beginning of the smartphone era, right? Because didn't the
Because-
iPhone come out in 2010?
Yeah, iPhone came out in 2009, end of
Nine.
2009, 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, so you got to be like a pioneer. You got to be right on the beginning of mobile games. I mean, I don't know if you've done much of it as of recently, but how, like, do you have any thoughts on how it's changed since then? Obviously, I'm sure the tools have gotten way better.
Yeah, actually, that is hard for me to comment on because I've been out of video games for so long. Like, I'm trying to even remember back then, I think you had to do everything through OpenGL, like on iOS. You basically just had to create a GL view, and then that was just your rendering screen, and you had to like control everything else, like all of the models and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, how are you going to push that to the context? Like, you had to manage all of that. And now you have like Scene Kit though, and stuff like that. That is kind of just like a layer over everything that has its own object management and component system.
I guess you said you don't know. Does anybody use Scene Kit? Because when I
Sprite Kit or
Scene
Kit?
Scene Kit is the 3D version.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, because still, I've when I'm reading about, let's say, job applications for mobile gaming, they still want experience in Metal, or they ask about like a 3D rendering like Metal or whatever, unless they're using Unity, in which case, I don't know.
Well, then you wouldn't even be doing the rendering. Like, basically, Unity handles all of that. And that's the other thing. Now there's a bunch of tools, like, so you don't even really just have to do stuff like exclusively like native stuff and use Scene Kit. So a lot of people just use tools like Unity and just do cross-platform develop it and never have to like mess with that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
What year did you start to? You said you used Unity at one job. What year was that? How many years after your first? I'm just curious.
Was like that was around the same time. It was I if I remember correctly, it was like Unity 3.5 was the first version I used.
I just have to imagine that going from like writing everything manually to Unity has got to be like, oh, so much better.
It was weird though, because I never really worked with like a tool like that did everything. So actually that was weird because I was so used to like writing everything that then like moving to a tool that did all that, I had to like learn everything about that tool and how it was doing stuff and how to interact with it.
This is a little backstory too, but I kind of remember in your junior game team, I believe that your team did not make an actual game. You just made a tool. Isn't that something like that? So it's like you were built.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, let's say it's not the same level as Unity, but like, was it kind of going in that direction?
I mean, it was never going to be something like as complete as Unity. I'm trying to remember everything it had. I don't even know if I can remember what other people were actually working on. Like, I remember like everybody kind of had their own thing, and it was, I don't like somebody was doing stuff with AI, but I don't know how that like integrated with the tool. Okay. I just know that I was doing the particle system, and that was what I was like working on, the particle editor or whatever.
Going back a little bit, just because I was curious when you were talking about DeVry, like, and you said that, it seemed very light compared to Digipen. I guess, first of all, did you make the obviously right choice? Like, for your dollar, do you think that it was worth going to Digipen? And if so, like, just what were the differences? Like, what kind of education do you think you would have received if you did finish at DeVry?
Yeah, it's tough for me to say overall because I only did like 1 quarter at DeVry. So, and this is also weird because like I feel like I definitely made the right choice leaving DeVry and doing something else. And I definitely got exposed to like a lot of programming information, like computer science stuff at Digipen. But I just think that Digipen, there's like a good middle ground. Like Digipen is just too expensive. Well, that's also depends. Like if you want to do video games, Digipen might be good because they did, especially at that time, like there wasn't as much like video game development knowledge on the internet. And so like it really was like more privatized. And so you have to go somewhere special or like do a lot of research on your own to be able to do like video game programming, especially properly in the more advanced stuff. And so like Digipen is really good for that. Or at least, like I said, it was at the time that information might be more available now, like on the internet. So like I said, I think there's some good middle ground where like, I definitely like, I don't think DeVry would have been that great because just like I was saying, when I was learning there, like it's hard for me to remember exactly what the curriculum was, but I remember it was just like super basic, like kiddie stuff, like, oh, like this is what a for loop is. And I, even at that time, I was no programmer, but I'd still had done like a couple classes, like I said, at like through my previous degree. And so that stuff I just like seemed really like, I don't know what to say, like light. It was just like really like a lot of theory. Like we barely, I don't even know if we had wrote programs. That's what I think the extra work was that I was asking for. Cause it was all just like reading in one of the classes and just like reading about for loops and conditionals. And like, you know, Matt at Digipen is just like right away you're writing code. Like every week or two you have like some coding.
Staying up until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. every night working on. So like it really was tough, but yeah.
That is one thing. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say that is one thing that I was always like. I do think you could probably get a decent like computer science degree at like UW, like even at the time compared to Digipen. But one thing I always was skeptical that I think probably does like help out with like a good education in computer science is hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And like I wasn't sure, like, because like the experience I had at DeVry, and I'd kind of heard about this at like other schools like UW. It's just like the computer science, there's a lot of theory, and so it's like less hands-on. You're just like constantly writing code. It's more just like learning it, like reading about it, you know, and the theory behind it. And I do think something that makes like somebody a good programmer is being exposed to. It's that practice. And so I think that was one good thing about Digipen. Like it was basically like coding boot camp for 4 years, just like constantly coding. So
yeah,
it was good for that for sure.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about like whether or not you just should go to college on the podcast, but I think the more important question, because it sounds like since he saw both, he's kind of in the boat of me where it's like it could be worth it depending on the school you go to, as long as the school represents what you're looking to get out of it. But like maybe, I don't know about DeVry. I don't know anything about it. I'm sure it's better than even the one that I went to, but the one that I went to was just like, well, I don't really have any other options, and I kind of need to be in college right now, and I kind of need to be studying. This is the college that I got. I don't know. Plus, maybe I kind of got myself into a bad situation, because not a bad situation. I started doing college. I don't even know if I ever talked about it on the podcast. I started going to college when I was like 16 at the community college here. I don't know if I've talked about it.
Maybe briefly, but yeah, remind me.
Yeah, but anyways, like I went at 16 to this community college, and the idea was that a lot of these kids are graduating high school with an associate's degree because you're earning high school and college credit for those college classes or whatever. So it's possible. It's hard, but it's possible to get 60 credits in those 2 years as a high school student. And so a lot of kids get associate's degrees. Plus it's like, it's just good because you get exposure to college early on.
Yeah.
But I think the problem for me was I just didn't leave. It was like, I'm already here. I've got these credits. It's a pain to transfer. I was working full time. So I'm just going to kind of finish out here. And maybe I just pigeonholed myself. Granted, I'm not disappointed with how things turned out necessarily. But as far as college goes, I just don't feel like I feel like I could have gotten more out of that like 2 or 3 years that I was in. You know, it sounds like somewhere like Digipen, you walk away going like, dang, I just learned a ton. Like, I know what I need to know. People want to hire from this college.
Yeah. Just
me leaving was like, I didn't learn much from that. Coincidentally, I was working through college and I got some experience there, which helped. But it just wasn't enough to actually, the education alone wasn't enough to get me anywhere.
So you worked at Signal for like roughly like 2 years.
2 years.
And then what did you go into games after that? Because like I mentioned before, right now you've been doing iOS development. So like, what did you do after Signal?
So after that, like I was saying, at the end of Signal, I had started to get some Unity experience, and that was actually my first exposure to mobile, like iOS, we'll say. Like I'd done a native Windows mobile development, but I'd never really messed with iOS native at that point. But I had Unity experience, and you did do a little bit of stuff. Like I had to still interact with like Xcode if I wanted to do certain things like profiling and just certain Unity ways to communicate with the native to do native specific things. So I had some exposure to that. So once I quit Signal, I ended up, I think first I got hired at this place that worked with like Disney and other companies that kind of made children's app games things. Like they would actually like have like a Disney children's TV show, like Dora the Explorer, and they would make like, you know, mobile app games out of those. And I think it might have been Dora, and that's why I say it was one of the ones I got hired to work on that. But only worked there a couple months, and I was using Unity. But then Disney did this thing where they shut down like all of these games that were being developed and brought everything in-house. And there's this big thing about that at the time. So then I was only contracting then. And so like basically the project I was working on got shut down. But then after that, I got hired at another place, just a design agency, Smashing Ideas. And then so I actually ended up working on a ton of different stuff there, but like I think this is just because mobile is really starting to take off because it was still early on. So like everywhere just always was trying to make apps, and like even though like there's different stuff to do at Smashing, they just always needed mobile developers, and I had a little bit of experience, so that just led me to being on those projects, which led to me getting more and more experience, and basically how that went.
So like what made you want to do it like forever going forward? And do you ever miss game development, or are you pretty happy with iOS development?
That's a good question. So it's hard because I don't miss the gaming industry. It's like that's like a pretty bad industry, especially just like the way a lot of stuff's structured, just like a lot of crunch. Like I'm sure there's places that aren't like that, but like it's just the video games industry is known just kind of for being toxic in general. But then it's funny, at the time I really did like just kind of not care about video games as much anymore. Like I loved them as a kid, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to go to Digipen and like learn to make video games. But then it was just like I was getting old enough at that point where I'm like, well, now I don't really just love them the same way that I used to. And so I just didn't care about them as much anymore. And so that coupled with the fact that the industry was so toxic, I really just wanted to get out of there. And I knew there was so much more to learn because like as hard as video game programming is, it's still like this very tiny part of computer science overall. And there's like so much other stuff to learn. And so I didn't also necessarily fall in love with mobile development. It's just like, that's just what I knew and was experienced in. And it, that's what people were looking for. So in some sense, like I've currently pigeonholed myself in that just because that's what I know. So that's what I keep doing.
And then it's Smashing. Let's say you started out as just like a mid-level developer, but you did move up to senior because you were there for a while, right? And you were involved in some of the hiring process there.
Yeah, because I don't even know. Well, actually, I started Smashing as a contractor. And then after working there for like 6 months, got hired full time. I think I was just a junior developer at that time, like just considered a junior back then. I'd probably been working in the industry for like 2.5, 3 years by then. But yeah, then just working there, I ended up working there 4 years, but over the course of that time, I just got promoted to a mid and then eventually to a senior. I was actually only a senior developer there for a few months, and then I quit. And then after a couple of months, they landed this contract that I didn't think they were going to get, but then they did. And then so I was actually interested in working on that project. So I came back as a contractor to work there just on that project, but like temporarily just until I was done working on that. And then I was still hired as a senior to work on that then. And that's when I was involved as part of the hiring process. Okay. To like hire people on for that project.
So at this point, now that you've kind of had exposure to all that stuff, and you said like mobile development isn't actually like, maybe it's not something that you're like thrilled about, what would you be excited about? Like if there was no concern of like losing a job and you could just kind of do whatever you wanted to do, like what would you try? What's interesting to you?
Well, that's actually a good philosophical question. It's something I've been like wondering a lot in life lately. It's something I talk with my girlfriend Rachel about a lot. Is just like I don't even know how much I'm in love with computer science. Like, there's aspects to it I like, but there's also a lot of things I don't like about it. And so, I just don't know how much like I really want to do this forever. And then I also think if there's other different things I could get into within computer science, and it's maybe, but it's also just like I have to kind of put forth more of an effort mentally these days to do that, just to be like, to dedicate myself to do that where I just don't feel like it as much. And that's why I wonder if there's other things I'd want to be doing in life, but that's an open question, trying to figure that out.
So here's the funny thing. Cause like I talk with Kevin we try to talk all the time, like maybe once every 2 weeks or something. He definitely doesn't study as much as me, but I don't know anybody who studies as much as me. But when we start talking about, because he always kind of says, he's like, I don't know if I'm in love with computer science. And then we'll start talking about some nerdy tangent that I want to talk about, like memory management or like code quality. And we will talk for 3 hours. And my wife will get upset because she's like, can we eat dinner? Can we? And like he'll go right down that rabbit hole with me, and he's just as passionate in the moment, in the discussion. Yeah, like he wants to do other stuff, like traveling's more fun, and maybe the job isn't like the end all be all of life, but like he gets nerdy.
I mean, maybe he likes the topic. It's just the industry that's kind of. I mean, there are some nuances to software development that are tough. A guy and I at work the other day were talking about like age discrimination in this industry, and I think it just has a lot to do with like one nuance of software development is just that like there's some crazy expectations for deadlines and hours worked and just exertion in general. And I can see how you could really be into the topic, but not so much into the industry. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's fair.
Is that kind of like a synopsis of what's going on? Like,
well, I think there's a lot involved, but that definitely like touches on part of it for sure. Where like, I'm trying to remember something you said through that, but just remind me again what you were saying really quick.
The age discrimination, was that it?
Like deadlines and long hours?
No, deadlines. Yeah, the deadlines and stuff. We're like, that's even kind of what I'm just dealing with right now. Actually, I always feel like I'm dealing with it at work. Is the aspect I like to it, I think, is there is just kind of this like core engineering thing where it's just like wanting to make something well or efficient. Like I never know how to like actually like put it into words, but it's just like wanting to like make something not even cool, just like make something built well. It's like I don't know like how to actually, like I said, put that into words, but like there is something about that I love, just like making like a really good system that works well, but that's not really conducive to like the real world where it's like you have all these, like you're saying, deadlines. And so product management wants all these things done. And like you're just trying to work at this like frantic pace, which is building up tech debt, but then nobody wants to like schedule time to like deal with that tech debt. And so then it just like, that's what really starts to make the day-to-day suck. Like I hate working in a project that has all this tech debt. It's just like that to me isn't fun. I'm like, I want to be cleaning this up and making like a really good project that's fun to work in. Like that's what's weird. Like that's the fun part to me, is like cleaning it up so it's fun to work in. But even if once I have it at that point, I'm like, oh, now I don't even care to do the work. Like I just want to make it fun to work and like, or like really good or efficient.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just like that is an interesting thing about like that dichotomy or whatever, the difference between managers and engineers. And in that book you had me read, that Developer Hegemony, he talked about that exact same thing, where like engineers want to be working in a nice code base and they want to spend hours, like sometimes even hours overnight, chasing that cool thing to learn or build nicely. But nobody wants to be in the project that's like 15 years old filled with tech debt. So whenever there's like the green field project, everyone's like, me.
Yeah. That was one of the really fun things about where I'm at now is, you know, and you were too, obviously, getting to build just fresh and make sure that everything was exactly how we want it. But, you know, now looking back, it's like, even though I dictated the direction and so did you, it's like there's still a lot of things that were just pressure for the timeline that I'm like, man, that's not something that naturally I would have done, and I'm not super excited about that. But I don't even mind playing janitor. If we
that's what he just said.
I think that's what he was saying too. Yeah, like I don't mind going back and cleaning things up. That's almost more satisfying sometimes than building it perfect the first time. If we can devote some time and I can go make that thing run way more efficiently, that's a really rewarding thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you find that you find like physical engineering like interesting? Like, do you do anything with your hands, building, woodworking, that kind of thing?
Not a lot yet, but I do. That's something I want to like put more effort into, because I feel like I would get more out of that than computers, like doing something on the computer.
You used to work on your motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean, I do some stuff. I'm just saying it's like I don't like necessarily have a hobby. Like I do some stuff. Like I have like woodworking tools or whatever, and like saws, and like I build like my cat's a Catio and things like that. And like I work on my motorcycle.
What did you call that?
A Catio.
Is that like a patio for cats?
Yes.
Catio.
Okay. I've never heard that term.
It's funny. It's like anybody who has a cat, I feel like knows this term. It's like me and Rachel just ran into somebody the other day. Like we used that term and they didn't know what it was. And it's always surprising to me when people haven't heard that term. Oh, you don't know what a catio is?
What are you doing with your life? You don't know what a catio is.
That's funny. I want to build like a dog house, but like I'll
It's
get
basically.
like. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's basically just like, yeah, if you have a deck or something, just enclosing it in some way so that you can just let the cats out there and not worry about them.
I see.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, the problem that I have is like I just love any sort of engineering. I geek out. It doesn't matter what it, even if I'm terrible at it, it doesn't matter. But anytime that I want to build something, I just get like carried away. The other case in point, the other day, we're throwing the tennis ball for my dogs. We're at the park, and I'm just like, with my arm, I can't hit the end of the park, and my dog will run. If I can shoot it that far, he'll do it. I tell my wife, I'm like, I'm gonna build like a tennis ball shooter. I'm doing all this research about tennis ball shooters, and I'm like, okay, so I can make like a pneumatic one that like is like run off compressed air and this and that. And we're literally at the store as I'm talking about it, and I'm just following her, looking down at my phone, not even paying attention. And she takes me to the dog aisle, and I look up, and she's like, "There's like one of those throwers."
Yeah.
She's like, "I bet you could throw this like 100 yards if you bought this thing." I'm like, no. But
I can get the gun.
Yeah, but I could build it, and it'd be super cool, and everybody would think it was super cool. But I have a tendency to get like carried away with stuff like that. I told my buddies in high school, that we like skateboarded and stuff and rode bikes. And I was like, we need like a ramp. And like any normal person would just go buy like a ramp. But me and my dad, we built like a half pipe in front of the house. And like the problem was it was so heavy that it wasn't like realistic to bring it out every day. So we put it on this wheel thing that was detachable that we could roll it down the driveway. It's like, I love stuff like that, man. Like it doesn't matter what kind of engineering it is. But I get your point, because like when you get to do stuff in your personal life, you can kind of take it as far as you want to go and get as perfect with it as you want. But it's true that in like the business world, there's so many other factors that prevent you from being able to be as perfect as you want. Yeah. So I guess of all of your jobs that you've had, have you had any that like stand out as like, that was a really good implementation of a solid software company? Or like, and then if so, like, why did you leave?
I'm trying to think. Like, actually, a lot of places I worked end up just like having tech debt in some form or not being great. Like where I worked at earlier this year, one of the last places I worked was Rover. I really like appreciated working there because I felt like the engineering
Rachel's in the background and she's on the podcast.
She probably can't hear that though.
Okay, maybe you could tell her that this is going to be on the internet.
You're on the podcast, Rachel. What were we talking about?
You said Rover earlier this year.
Oh yeah, I was working at Rover, and I appreciate it, like, because a lot of the people I worked with were just really good, solid engineers, and it seems like we all cared about similar things, like having a clean code base. And so there's like a lot of good processes in place to try to facilitate that, like just really good PRs and like review systems, and like people just having like good comments and like all caring, and like not caring either if people are like leaving comments and like, hey, maybe we can clean this up. Like nobody like getting like hurt feelings over that, and like actually appreciating that and liking that other people are contributing like to a clean code base and just like well-structured, systems. And so I really did like working there. I mean, like, for that aspect of it, like there's still, like I said, everywhere you work, you're going to still have to deal with like some product management stuff. But a downside too, though, is that like app was 10 years old. So there's, as good as like the current system and like implementations that we were working on were working pretty well. Like every once in a while, we still had to interact with stuff that was like 10 years old and like under the hood. And like we were trying to just like cover it up. But so that's kind of irritating.
So that must have been in Objective-C. Were you mixing Objective-C and Swift at that point?
Yeah. There's a mix. Like everything new is being developed in Swift. And so there's like, at the point I got hired, there's like a really good like amount of Swift in there. It's hard to like say if it was 50-50 or what, but there's just like a good amount of Swift. There's also still like a lot of old Objective-C stuff that we like had to deal with. And like those are some systems that like everything was built on, like our, core data, the database system was like originally in Objective-C and kind of like spaghetti. And then we ended up just having these like stuff we layered over that was kind of like built better and just kind of hid that stuff. But if anything was broke underneath, you had to like dig deep in all of this really gross code.
Let's talk about Rover a little bit, because there's two things that I want to hit on that. One that I think is really cool to talk about, because we haven't had anybody on that worked for a company that was probably or certainly deeply affected by COVID. Like, how did that play out in your final days? Because that's obvious, you got let go because of that, right? Because the industry kind of.
Yeah, essentially, like the technicality is like they laid off 41% of the company. Then I was in 9% that was offered standby, which meant like you're basically on furlough for 3 months, and then we'll let you know if we need you back or not. And then I just elected to be laid off or whatever, the severance package at that point. So I was essentially laid off.
But you had you had just been promoted not too long ago, because you started out there as like a non-lead, and I remember you had gotten promoted. Weren't you like leading the architecture team or something? I don't remember the details.
Not the architecture. I was on an architecture team. I wasn't leading it, but I was like, the way it was structured there is like we had quite a big mobile team at the point that I got hired. So we ended up kind of splitting into sub teams that would like take on different parts of the app or different like business logic areas. Mm-hmm. And I was just the lead of one of those teams out of like the 3 or 4 teams.
Oh, okay.
And but yeah, like, and then those people would be involved, like the leads, and even other people would just be in architecture meetings and things like that.
And then, so then you elected to get or to get the severance package, and then
yeah.
Then I mean, this was, well, I guess this was starting at COVID, and then so how was that?
Well, I guess, yeah, just to, I think, answer your question a little more, like that was pretty quick too. Like Matt had said, like I'd even just got a promotion because like we had our year-end reviews. And so, you know, then they're still going over all of those in January and February. And then I'm trying to remember how it all happened, because like I was actually on vacation like right when COVID really started to break out in the US, like the first week of March. And then, so then when I got back from work, the very first day I was supposed to go back to work is when everybody started, it was like mandated to work from home. And then I think it was like 3 weeks later, everybody got laid off like that did. Like, I think it was only like 3 weeks later. I remember at the time, I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about stuff, but like they were honest with us while it was happening. Like they're like, this is like severely like impacting the business.
Well, because
everybody suddenly was staying up from home, and so they didn't need people to like walk their dogs or sit
in
their
case
dogs.
People don't know, Rover is an app that helps connect you with dog watchers, like dog sitters or dog walkers. And yeah, if everyone's at home, then people don't need that. So
it's pretty interesting how Rover. I guess I didn't even realize you said that they had like a 10-year-old code base, which must have meant that they started around the origin of the iPhone.
I guess so, yeah.
And I remember hearing about them maybe like probably when we got our apartment in 2017, 2018. And it seems to me like that's when they probably took off. But that's crazy to hear that they've actually been in business for that long. Do you know anything about the history of like the company? Did they kind of take off like at some point? Did something propel them into success or what?
Yeah, I'm actually, even for somebody who worked there like a year and a half, I'm pretty ignorant about the history. I'm trying to remember. It might have been like an 8-year-old app, because I thought like I saw back like 2012 was like the comments that I saw on the code base. So it probably wasn't immediately right after like the iPhone started, but it still was like pretty early on. But yeah, they started in Seattle, so it would make sense. Like other places would, like they like slowly expanded probably, so other major cities probably didn't hear about them till later. But I didn't even know about Rover until I basically heard they were hiring. Like, and they'd been in Seattle that whole time. Like, I didn't have a dog, so I guess I just didn't need them. But like, I was just completely oblivious to their existence until like I heard they were hiring, and I was like, oh, that could actually be a cool place to work.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I thought it was really cool when I heard that you worked there, because that's like, I don't know, one of those companies I've heard a bunch about. One thing I know, we're kind of circling back to the very beginning, but one thing I don't think we touched on too much was just like, I know that you had said that you were kind of getting a sociology degree. I'm kind of curious about that and why. but even more so, like, what was it? Just Matt getting into programming, or was it what happened that made you want to get into it? And then kind of as you were going through college, like what kept you motivated to keep learning, and how did you keep learning outside of college?
Yeah. Okay. I guess to go back with the
Sociology.
or was it?
What,
Yeah, sociology.
was that Miss Hull?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say like really what it was something like that's why I got interested in that. But really, just the reason overall is when I first graduated high school, I just had no idea what I wanted to do at all, like no idea. And so I was just like, oh, I guess I'll go to community college and take some classes. And then at the end of 2 years, it's just like, okay, now I guess I'm going to transfer to university and take more classes. And actually at that point, that's where I like needed to declare a major. And I just did not know up to that point. And so
I dropped out of school. I dropped out of school, and my two other buddies who we went to community college with kept going to UW.
Yeah. And so at that point, you have to declare a major, basically. So I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'd happened to take a couple classes at community college in sociology that were really like eye-opening, like for me at the time. And I really loved those classes and I loved the material. So I was like, whatever, like it wasn't for a job at all. It was just like, I don't know what to do. And I find this subject interesting. And that's why even at the time, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this after school. I just had no idea what I was doing. And this is also back where I was just like, oh, just getting a degree is probably fine. Because that was 2001. And so it was a different landscape then. And that was starting to change around that time, even where degrees started having less value.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. The kind of, for context, the reason that I wanted to circle back is I just want to have a chance to talk about it because, again, I've got a buddy that we just had on the podcast that's kind of in a similar situation where he just didn't know what he wanted to do, so he got like a psychology degree. And I feel like there's a lot of people like that. I certainly had quite a few friends like that just didn't know what they were going to do, so they kind of picked a degree, and then they get kind of towards the end and they're like, okay, well, this wasn't for a job. I just picked it because it sounded interesting.
My oldest brother, he has a degree in psychology, but he works in IT.
Yeah,
not a programmer, but like that was it. And he didn't even graduate. I mean, eventually he did, but it was a similar situation where he went to school pursuing the psychology degree, started getting these jobs at like tech, like help desk stuff, and he just has grown in that field. And he had like one Spanish class to take, and he finally took it like 10 years later.
That's funny. Yeah, I just feel like there's so many people that do that, and then especially if you're one like deciding, okay, I'm going to make like a college career out of it. It sounds like you. Well, I guess I don't know how many years in were you when you decided to pivot and go? Not very far, right? Less than a year.
No, he graduated.
In what?
He graduated.
Yeah, I got my sociology degree.
Oh,
he graduated.
Oh, and then you got another degree.
Yeah.
He
has two bachelors.
Wow.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Dude's a double bachelor.
So
okay.
This is why exactly what you're saying. That's why I dropped out of school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I did not like school. We were doing that band, and I was just saying, like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get this band going. And
how many years did you get in before you dropped out?
I got my associate's degree. I did 2 years at community college, and I never went back until Digipen. I never went back to college. So they, Kevin and our other buddy, continued on to UW and got their full bachelor's degree. And I was just working. I was working at Godfather's Pizza. Kevin was too, by the way. I was just cutting pizzas.
You know? So you, this is crazy to me. So you graduate, you get this sociology degree, and you're like, boom, walking the stage, got my thing. What's the plan? Like, were you already?
I skipped graduation, but.
Oh my God. Okay, but you get your degree, you finish regardless. So then, where's your head at? Where am I going from here?
Trying to remember and put myself back then, but I know it was just kind of. I think at that point, I just wanted to take time off and just kind of live life, basically. Like, I don't want to worry about that right now of like what my plan is and where I'm going. Like, I just got this degree. I'm just going to, like I said, just go get some jobs and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And just like we were in a band at the time. So it was kind of just like taking a break and having fun instead of like really trying to plan for my future at that point.
I envy you guys as 20-something-year-olds. You know, I
He says that, but hold on, I'm going to stop him because because we're 37 doing really well. I think we were both doing really well. You're 22 and 23.
23.
Sorry. Whoa.
Yeah,
Sorry.
whoa, man.
23 and a half. Excuse me.
23 and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and you're doing really well. You're like senior iOS dev. Who knows what's going to happen at current work? Like you're doing really well. So I understand like the grass is always greener, but like I did work a bunch of bad jobs, and Kevin worked with me in almost all those jobs. Courtesy Glass was not fun. Corporate Express was not. I shouldn't talk about the companies. They weren't bad companies. I didn't like them though. Like the experiences I had, I would have rather have done something. It would have been better if I would have used that time. Like looking back, if I would have used that time, not wasting my money. The band stuff was fun, but
I don't, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if it's that I envy. It's not that I envy you guys. Like I would rather have it another way. It's just I envy the fact that there's the possibility to just be a free-spirited 20-something-year-old and just go have a good time. It's just
I did scuba dive in the Philippines multiple
dude, you've
times.
had some crazy experiences. And on my end, my dad growing up was like, dude, even if we'd go to like a theme park or something as a family, it was like at 2:23, we're going to be on this ride. And at 4 o'clock, and we're going to eat at this time. We don't want to eat too much and then go on the water ride. So we're going to eat and then we're going to go on the smaller ride. And then after that, if the food is like,
His dad's a Marine.
this is my father. So of course, when I'm like graduating high school, this man has all the pressure in the world. I mean, and I feel a lot of pressure because I'm like my dad in a lot of ways. And I'm just like, well, there has to be a plan. I can't like not know what I'm doing. I have to know what I'm doing. So I've got to finish school and get this degree. And then after the degree, there can't be any like interim period. I have to like immediately go into some job and start getting some experience. And so like I just never had the opportunity to do that. Just the thought of like getting some degree and being like, yeah, I'm just not worried about it right now. That just sounds crazy and sounds super cool because all I ever do is worry about what the next sort of like step is. And sometimes you gotta like take a step back and enjoy where you're at. You know what I mean? So
There's a mix. I agree. I think
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
because also if we could have been where you were at 23, like you did go to college, but also some self study. I was like $120,000 in debt, and I don't know what Kevin's situation was. And like, cause like UW was less expensive, but you still had to take out student loan debt for that. I think it was right at the time.
Yeah. It was nothing compared to Digipen, but I
Yeah,
still had to. Yeah.
and then Digipen was quite expensive. And then I mean, but like we mentioned, the benefit of Digipen is there is a huge network, and I think I started when I was working in Singapore. My starting salary was like roughly the equivalent of like 65 or 70,000. So that's like out of school, and before that, I was working like construction, like
yeah, yeah.
glazer is the official title. So
So okay, so now that I've got the timeline a little bit better, I was thinking that DeVry was something to do with sociology, but it sounds like it wasn't. It sounds like that was your. So when you went to DeVry, it was immediately tech. You didn't do anything other than programming there.
Yeah, I didn't need to for a lot of that stuff because I already had all of those classes from my previous degree.
So when you okay, so if you have a bachelor's degree and then you get another one, is there a whole lot that you get to skip, or do you still pretty much have 4 years ahead of you?
Well, it actually didn't work that way since I went from like a bachelor's degree in arts to bachelor degrees in science. So I ended up still having to like take quite a bit of classes like math and physics and things like that, and then all the computer science classes. But I did get to skip like some basic elective stuff and some English classes and stuff like that.
Is sociology arts? It seems like that could be a science, no?
I don't know. Yeah, it's technically an art, but you could say that about a lot of these things. It's a soft science, sociology is, but
I gotcha. So okay, so how many years after you get the sociology degree do you go to DeVry? That's the last part to fill in this timeline.
I feel like it was a year. I'd have to really think back, but I feel like I just really only had like a year off.
So let's see if we can figure it out. So we graduated high school in 2001. I quit going to college in 2003. So I would have been like 20. I think I started Digipen. I started Digipen at 24, I guess, like in 2006. So yeah, I think it would have been a 3-year gap for me. So yeah, it sounds like it would have been a 1-year gap for you.
So, and you had a how
Yeah,
many?
because
Oh, go ahead.
I think I started UW a semester late, so I ended up like graduating later too, because there's like this weird transfer thing. So I ended up graduating like the winter of 2006, so just early in the year 2006. So I think that does line up. And then I probably would have worked a couple craft jobs over the summer, like courtesy glass, and then you started going to Digipen, and then eventually I started going to DeVry.
I think this is just a really cool story of like, I know that you're not saying that like you're super enthused about the software world, but you have a successful career, obviously. I think it's really
Yeah.
cool that you were like, well, I got a bachelor's degree, don't really want to work here, not done yet, gonna keep pushing, gonna keep getting
That is
some.
cool. Yeah.
I think that shows like some really cool determination. Because my question was gonna be, so you decide at some point during the sociology degree that that's not what you wanted, and then you pivoted, but obviously that's not what you did. You had it even worse than some people. At least some people catch it like 2 years or 3 years in and say, okay, I'm going to move now. But now you have 2 degrees to show for all of that work you did, which is really, really cool. Did you ever at all feel like you messed up, or even today, or do you feel like, do you wish you would have just done software earlier on, or are you pretty much happy with the way things turned out?
Hmm. I think I agree with Matt when he was saying earlier. It's just kind of a mix because you're talking about like how you started taking things serious right away, and then like we did that, like, oh, we're just gonna be an abandoned, take life as it comes for a while. I really like. I even talked with like my girlfriend about this because she has a younger sister, who like she kind of has similar problems about like where she's going in life, and I really just think it is a good mix of like you should try to plan for the future, but also don't like still try to like appreciate the present too. Like just don't like sacrifice everything for the
Maybe you don't need
future,
to
but
stress
like
out so much. Yeah.
yeah, you should. But like I do think it's good advice to like take it into account. Like still plan for it. Like just like at least be thoughtful about it. Because like yeah, I'm okay where I'm at now, but I could be a lot further along. I could be like better placed now, and it's just like it's one of those things. It's give and take. Like I'm not as far as long as I could be right now, and that's because instead I made a lot of really awesome memories when I was younger, and that. But the thing is, like that sounds cool, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's how you should live life." And it's like it is like kind of good. I like having these memories, but at the end of the day, they're memories too. It's just like, like that's something I think about. I used to think like, "Oh, my life is just a story, and I want it to be like amazing." But it's just like the older I get, I'm just like, it doesn't really matter like how awesome this thing I did 20 years ago was. Like, who
Yeah.
cares?
I don't look in the past too much
Oh,
about.
please. Your
Oh
story
no
is
no.
so cool and you
Yeah.
talk about it all the time and it's
But
super
But a
badass.
lot of times I talk about how like, oh, I wish I would have done that. Like, what I mean is I don't try to get a bunch of ego from the stuff that I
Dude,
did. Like,
everybody that you talk to about your past is like, this guy is a rock star. Like, this guy is super cool. You just have the most insane story. It's cool that you two got to kind of be a part of it with each other, but I just think it's so cool. My friends call me old man. They literally call me old man. Dude, like, granted, we've gotten to do some cool stuff. Like, oh, I got to take this trip to the Philippines or whatever, but it's not like, yeah, dude, I went scuba diving, met a shark, got a pirate tattoo, became a professor. Like there's like you just have the craziest story. Like that's not normal.
I don't
Like
think that shark part was real.
I know. I was trying to give you one there so the viewers would be like, oh, you met a shark. No, but it's just cool. Like you just did all this super cool stuff. Meanwhile, I
The
got
pirate tattoo is real. I got a dragon tattoo as well.
what this tells me is I'm gonna have the most intense midlife crisis at like 40. I'm like, "Ugh," and I'm gonna have to go buy a
It's
guitar and
possible.
yeah.
That'd be sweet.
Maybe
Though.
I'll start a band. Maybe I'll relive your
Yeah, just
youth
do it.
when I'm
But
like
yeah,
40.
that's the thing. That's what like the possibility. I think Tony Robbins, who is it? The Total Money Makeover guy. He says, "Live like nobody else, so that you can live like nobody else." And
Yeah.
like he's just all about yeah, saving up money so that when you are 40 or 50, you're not realizing like, oh no, I have to start saving for retirement, and what am I gonna do? And like getting your life in order at 40. I'm lucky that I started getting my life in order at 26, like 26 ish, right? But like, yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys are lucky because you got to make the memories, which
Yeah.
I wouldn't discount. Like it's a big deal. It's
Yeah,
cool. You
yeah.
guys got to have all these cool memories, and you guys are still young enough to have
Yes.
found comfort that like now in your 50s, you're not like stressing about where money's going to come from and having to break your back to work real hard. Like you guys just have the perfect storm. Like 37, your joints are good, your muscles are good, your bones still good, and y'all got that comfort at that point. I can't imagine being like my old neighbors where I love this man to death. His name is Dan, and he partially raised me during high school. This man was like 80 years old. He owned a pest control business and worked as a bus boy at a hotel because they needed the money. They didn't set up for success early on, and the guy's a hard worker and it's admirable, but like he definitely wishes that he had found comfort earlier on. So but he has a bunch of crazy stories through 65. I mean, this guy, it seems like the later you kind of push off being responsible, the more stories you have. So that's pretty cool. But anyways, so don't discount the path that you took. But now that you're kind of in, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I don't mean to like discount the memories. Like I think they offer a valuable perspective. It is good to like go do stuff like I don't know how you describe it, like crazy things in life, or just like life or eye-opening events or whatever. Just do something that's not normal. Like I said, I think it's good to like, especially when you're younger, it helps like give you perspective on the world. So I think a lot of that's good. But what?
Sorry, what's that movie quote from the Atari song? If you're not a rebel by age 20, you got no heart. If you're not
no heart, a
if
conservative
you're not firmly established by 30, then you got no brain, or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know. I forget what movie that's from.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think that might have not even been Atari, but actually it could be. I don't remember.
It was.
So if you kind of decided to pivot and go a different direction now, would you use, I don't know, like, I guess, would you use your sociology degree at all to go do something? Is that even something that interests you at this point?
What's your third degree going to be?
Yeah, or what's your third degree going to be? Yeah.
Over the last few years, it's something I do think about. I really don't know if I have anything. Like, if I was just going to give you an answer, marine biology. But like, I don't know if I'll actually.
Because you love dolphins?
Well, really, like, part of being an engineer, just something else I just really love in life is science. Like, I'm a computer scientist, but I also just in real life, even my hobbies, consider myself a scientist, just in the way I view life. And so, like, I really like science, and I kind of wish I was more of a scientist on a official, like, day to day. So I could see that. Yeah, basically.
It seems like so many.
Just even the title, but.
It seems like so many like software engineers share a lot of the same. Like I feel like a lot of us are into science, a lot of us are into things that we can't do. I mean, if you want to make money, it seems like you got to do software engineering, because I don't know if the job market in marine biology is booming or not, but I'm gonna guess no. But it would be cool. So, but that's a good answer. I mean, because I've thought a lot about like if I had no limitations and it didn't matter, what would I do?
Yeah.
Mine's really lame right now. I think I would do like real estate, but maybe I should come up with or actually I'd be an astronaut. Literally, if I could do anything that I wanted to do, dude, I'm being an astronaut.
No corona in space.
No corona in space. That's probably true. But the International Space Station does have leaks, and that's got to be terrifying. They had
I did not know that.
There was a leak recently in the Russian part of the space station, and they duct taped it. Pretty sweet.
I mean, that's solid.
That's what you do.
All you need is some duct tape and some wire. You're good.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I mean, kind of like towards the end of the podcast, what we like to focus it on is just like advice for those that maybe went through a path like yours, or like what advice do you have for somebody that is kind of looking at getting into engineering? Who knows where they're at? Maybe they just got their first degree in sociology, but like, what's the advice? What do you wish you would have done? What did you do well? Like anything that stands out as profound?
Or like since you have been part of the interview process, is there something that you look for in junior devs, like something that maybe is lacking, or like something that you like look for specifically for somebody who's getting that first job?
I'm always excited to see a sociology degree on there. No, I'm just joking. But.
Yeah. 2 bachelor's degrees or else no dice.
I don't even actually list that on my resume ever.
Yeah.
Like nobody ever would know that I have that for my resume or anything. I only list my computer science degree. But I guess first, those are kind of two different questions. I guess for somebody starting out, like we kind of already like talked about this generically, but I guess like I think the hardest part is really just trying to find something that you like a mix of something that like you can feel okay doing. I don't want to say passionate about, but like, you know, it's like enough that it's not going to drive you insane. Just like obviously me and Matt have talked about like jobs we had before we went into computer science that we just hated doing them. So there's going to be like a lot of crappy jobs out there. Like you just don't even want to do them day to day. Like I complain and say, maybe I want to do something besides computer science, but it's way better than a lot of like the jobs I had in the past. And so I would say like, try to find something that you'll at least be somewhat interested in. Like you don't necessarily have to be super passionate, because then the flip side is like also think about something that like it doesn't have to make you the most money ever, but something that like you'll be well enough off at. Because like I was saying, like at the time I went to school, it was just kind of like, this is just what you do. You just get a degree, and like then hopefully you can just having a degree will open doors. And that was kind of like ending the years of that myth at that time. And so I do think like if you're going to like, especially with how much it costs, like if you're going to go to school, like you really should make sure that it's going to have some kind of return investment. Like when I was younger, I wouldn't have said that to people. Like I appreciate school, like higher education for what it is. Like it can be really important, even if you're not talking about like what it can do for you, like in terms of like a lucrative job or anything. But like, I think it's just invaluable anyways. Like it can really just help like open your perspective and just like make you learn so much about life. But it's that there's like a rising cost to that. And so it's foolish not to take that into account. You always have to like say, is this worth it? Or can I get it in another way? And so that's basically it. Like try to find something that like you're okay doing. Try to find something that you could like maybe like doing, but make like a good amount of money off of it. If you're gonna like, I wouldn't even necessarily recommend just doing something like computer science, because like, oh, you'll make a lot of money if it's not something like you're not interested in all, or you're not going to get into. But so actually, I guess another piece of advice: when you're young, do a lot, like try out a lot and just try to see what you like. Even try something like do some programming and see if you're into it. Because like I was saying, like that is something, that's what happened to me. I was just going to school for sociology and I had an elective and I took a computer science class and it was like, oh, that's interesting. And that's where it led me later on. So
when you're I guess for the new up and coming developer that's considering college or not, since you've been involved in the hiring process and you're kind of talking like, you know, like you got to weigh college and the return on investment. If somebody just decides, you know, maybe I'm not going to do that, the risk is too great, or maybe I see another path that doesn't cost nearly as much money. When you're interviewing people, do you take the college part like super seriously? Or
if let's say somebody's good, like we can ask this a couple of different ways. Let's say
Yeah.
somebody's good, but they don't have a college degree. How much do you care?
to be completely honest, like I don't even know if I had really even thought about this till you're bringing it up. And now that you're bringing it up, I'm like, I don't even know if I've bothered ever looking at their like college experience. Like I couldn't even tell you anybody like I've interviewed what school they went to. Like I just like, if it's on there, I must just like glaze over it. Like I just don't care. Like
It's just
that's
like
what I
it's
think
there.
of as an interviewer. Yeah. Like there's so many different like kinds of interviews now where you can get like a better feel for somebody's experience. Like, you know, like they have to go through some coding challenges and stuff. And like that's all I really care about. Like I only care about experience. I don't care how you got that experience. Like the only other thing I care about is like your ability to learn. Like how much can you absorb and like, you know, start to grow, like if you're a junior, because like you'll have to look out for that too. It's like juniors aren't going to know everything. So it's just like look for like how much they can grow, like how much they can take in and grow. But otherwise, like it's just their experience. I don't really care about like what their college education is.
Do you know, or do you remember if you ever hired anybody where that job was their first programming job? Like I assume that their resume would contain other McDonald's or something, but do you remember if you were hiring them for their first programming job?
I don't think I have personally. I know there was one that was close. Like when I was working on Reach now, there was somebody who was hired on the Android side, but I wasn't part of that interview. And I think that was his first job out of college. I ended up working with him a bunch later. But like I wasn't part of that hiring. I think everybody else I've interviewed had a prior experience.
Okay.
So it sounds like your
But
opinion.
yeah, that's a good point though, about like if it like that is something else to consider if you're interviewing somebody who's fresh out of school. Like I feel like I don't know what that interview process would be like. Like then I still feel like it would just be about like the coding challenges you give them to try to just gauge how much they know. And it's less about like, oh, did you go to school or not? It's just like, how much do you know?
Can you do the job? Literally, can you do the job?
Yeah.
It sounds like your opinion would be like college could be useful if you feel like that's the mechanism for gaining your knowledge.
Learning the most knowledge possible.
But like that's the extent of it.
Yeah.
Because I agree. Of all the people that I've interviewed, I very rarely ever. The only time I even noticed it was when I saw this one guy had like an MBA. We were just talking about that. And I'm like, oh, that's a big deal. That's cool. But like, I don't even know what college it was. I'm not sure. Maybe like MIT would stand out or something. But it's just, I think you're right. I think that the programming industry has gotten so good at determining someone's skill level without like actual resume content, just like having them actually do challenges or whiteboarding or.
Well, our mutual buddy says programming is a blue collar job, and because he says it's kind of like being a mechanic or whatever. Obviously not like the actual job itself, but it's like it's one of those things where in general it doesn't seem to matter if you got the degree or not. It just matters, can you do it? What actual knowledge do you have? And
so I guess just for a more specific question, because now I have a personal reason to ask.
Actually, sorry, he says trade, not blue collar job. He says like a trade
blue
job.
collar, yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, there's even trade schools. We call them boot camps, but they're popping up just like any other trade school.
Yeah.
Okay, just one more question, I guess, just piece of advice, since we just had somebody on the podcast that probably could use some advice. This guy, he was getting a psychology degree. He stopped. He's getting a 1-year certificate right now. It's just an intro to programming. He's learning Python, HTML, and he'll be done in about 9 months. But it's as much as you can learn in a 1-year program in college. He says he kind of likes Python. HTML is pretty interesting, but he's like just pretty clueless in terms of where he's going to go next. That's not an insult. That's just an observation. He just really doesn't know where he's going to go.
He just doesn't know. Yeah. Clueless has like a bad rap as a word, but it's like he doesn't have a clue about where he should go.
Right. So what's some advice for somebody that if you're like, trying to mentor somebody that's got 9 months left in this programming certificate, he's not going to know enough to get a job afterwards. What do you recommend?
I'll be honest. I don't know if I have a lot of good advice for this situation, because I'm just trying to think like, first, there's just so many different areas you could go into. So I was first trying to think about if there's an area to say like, well, maybe try to focus on this, but like, even if you want to say back end or something, or just like front end, then there's so many different variations within those. Like, I would guess I might say like, if you gravitate towards back end, you might be better off, because like basically everything needs a back end. Like, I guess everything needs a front end too. See, that's what I don't know. Like, well, so, yeah, I don't really know like specifically for that, but I guess what are you gonna like? What's some more details like?
Well, I think you kind of answered it without answering it, which is that like obviously the first place that your mind goes is, well, this certificate's not enough to even help you really decide what you want to do. So you've kind of got to make a decision now. You kind of need to start looking at, do I like front end work, even if you don't really know what that means? Do I like the idea of making something visually appealing and interactive, or do I like the idea of kind of data crunching just in general, even though you might not know what that means yet? I think that's the piece of advice that we kind of gave him on the podcast. Yeah. He didn't really understand what that means quite yet, but it's like right now is probably the best time to kind of start deciding, what do I like? Like, I interact with technology every day. What do I like? For me, it was easy. It was just like, I like apps. Phones are cool. I'm going to go check that out. And I like it, and I still do. But I think that's Matt brought up a good point, which is if you like Python, maybe you should learn Django. But I think in general, you would agree that like the best thing he could do is probably A, determine that, and B, probably start getting some side education, right? Wouldn't you agree? Like, kind of, if you're going to get a 1-year certificate, it's pretty much, we would all pretty much agree, you're going to have to learn some more than that, right?
Yeah, I was trying to think of the best way to do that. I was saying the first part about figuring out what he would want to do, because like my next thought was like, then the best thing you can do is try to just get hands-on experience, start side projects, and just start coding. And especially like real apps, like come up with a real, like, well, it depends on what he's doing, right? But this is why like front end might be good, because it'll actually give him something he can interact with. And then if he wanted to like hook it up to a back end, he could do that too. But like, just something like, think of an idea, like tell him to think of an idea and then try to actually make that. And then like, cause that'll start to give him an idea of like what goes into a project. And then, but then it's the hard part is figuring out how to do things correctly, because like something I feel like I missed out on in my career, this actually would have been good to talk about a lot, is like, I feel like I was always kind of the most experienced person working in my area. Like basically I never had a mentor.
Yeah.
Like, cause when I was working in the,
up until this current job. I mean, you weren't my mentor.
When I was in the video game.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. When I was in the video game industry, I, like I was the only developer working on 2 separate projects, and everybody else was busy on their own projects. So just like I had to make every decision, and like I was fresh out of college and I didn't know what I was doing. And I just felt like that. And like almost everywhere I went, I just like had no idea what I was doing, and just kind of learning by like what other people were doing around me. And like there's people who were more experienced than I was. So I try to like mimic what they do while trying to like consolidate that with what I learned in school. Like, shouldn't we not be using singletons? But like global singletons. And then like, but this like senior developer is doing it, I guess it's fine. And then watching that like fall apart in a project, and then like being like, okay, that's why you don't use global singletons. So there's a lot like you just kind of learn through experience, and like, or at least like I had to, and I didn't have anybody to like to really teach me like how to properly architect things. And I just like learned through error, based trial and error is like how I learned a lot of stuff. So that's what I'm trying to think of, like what a good resource could be for somebody like learning. Because if you go to like blogs and just like, you know, basic like treehouse tutorials and stuff like that, you're not going to like, that'll teach you how to code, but it won't teach you how to be an engineer.
You're not
so like that's always the hard part.
You're not getting that advance, like that next step. Like, yeah, I feel the same way. It's hard.
Yeah,
so
but I mean, maybe that just comes with time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, that's why I would say real life projects are I think the best way to do it, even if you're on your own, because you'll start to get a feel for what works and not. You'll be like I keep having trouble like trying to make this thing this way in my app. Like there's got to be a better way. And then if you're a good enough engineer, you'll think about it enough until you come up with a better way.
Right. That's good advice. I guess this will actually be my last question. I know I said last question, but that made me think of a better way to like phrase this question. That is really good advice though. Here would be my question. If you've got this guy, my buddy, he's got his certificate, he's got his resume, and on his resume it says maybe he's got some partial college, he's got a 1-year certificate, he has no actual programming experience in his jobs, but you're forced to interview this guy. He's going to be a junior dev, and you're forced to interview him. He lands in your lap, he comes in your office, and you're interviewing him. What are you asking him to get to know? Like, I guess the reason I'm asking it this way is because this might help him decide, like, this is what I'm going to go work on over the next 9 months or so that I know what I'm getting into when somebody starts interviewing me, and I can answer those questions. Like, what would you do to determine whether or not you're going to hire this kid?
So this is somebody just like with a year certification and no projects, you're saying?
Yeah, he's got no official full-time work experience, but I'm sure you'd probably want to know about projects, like side projects.
He obviously would have done some coding in the certification. So, but yeah, he has no actual work experience. So what would you ask him?
Well, that's why I guess first I was asking about projects, because that would be something I would immediately ask. Like, they don't necessarily have to have it. That's just where my mind would go, because I'm like, oh, I don't care what you did in school necessarily. Like, I'm not at least interested in asking what kind of stuff you learned in school. I just want to see what you can do. And so first it's like, do you have any projects that I can see so I can just look at and see like what you've done? But then I'd probably, like, if I knew all of that, I'd probably do what I would consider softball questions, like about memory management, about structs versus classes, things like that, just to try to gauge what kind of stuff they did learn in the certification and how much like computer science knowledge they actually like soaked up, or like how much of it did they just like learn to copy and paste iOS tutorials.
That is really good advice, and I think I'm gonna. No, it really is, because like I think that if you have nothing to show for yourself, it's gonna get really hard to get a job. I think people are really willing to listen to you and talk to you if you've got projects that we can look at. Because I mean, you might not even. It sucks that you don't have work experience, but like as far as your just programming skill, we can figure that out from a project that you built. So I would start investing in that. And also, it probably is worth just learning some computer science, general programming knowledge, whatever, you know, so that when they do throw, they are going to inevitably throw those softball questions at you. Sometimes they even throw them at you later on. Like even in any interview, they're going to ask you questions like that. So
the Facebook interview asked.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I got asked that for a bunch of places I was interviewing at, like in some of the latest rounds, like I was just doing.
Sort of like the barrier to entry for
yeah.
job. So
that's usually like the first round.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, well, cool, man. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been like really cool to hear your experience. Your timeline is insane. It's just so cool to me. All these different developers we have on, just vastly different backgrounds. And
that's actually maybe the most interesting thing that we're going to see is that no two people have the same style of background. Me and Kevin did happen to go to the same school, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean, like the fact that you even finished a degree, like that's not ever going to happen again. We're probably not going to have anybody that finished a degree and then, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else and get another degree. So, anyways, that's really cool. As always, check us out on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else we are. No, we're not on Facebook. We are on Twitter.
We have a Facebook.
We are on Facebook.
We have a Facebook. We have a Discord channel. If you have any questions for us or if you want to ask Kevin something, maybe not live, but like we can throw some questions his way.
Yeah, for sure. Kevin, thanks again. That is episode 23. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will see y'all next week.